I did have, if you were here last week, I did suggest if you had a chance to read the story of Joseph. It really expands from what Exodus or Genesis 37 all the way through Genesis 45. Although I did forget one chapter, Genesis 38 actually goes back to another story. But at any rate, hopefully you had a chance to read that. But if not, we're just going to just quickly recap the life of Joseph, and then we'll look at how he kind of gave us a hint of what Christ would do. So Jacob really favored Joseph, and of course the story all kids know if they go through Sunday school is the robe, the coat of many colors, the beautiful garment that Jacob gave Joseph. And of course Joseph, kind of young in his teens, he kind of was maybe a little bit of a braggart. Didn't really understand the circumstances. So remember, he has a couple dreams, and in those dreams, it appears that his brothers and his own father would one day bow down to him, which actually does happen. But it was probably not something Jacob should have really made known or made a big deal out of it, understanding it would cause a lot of jealousy with his brothers. And they did. They got so jealous of Joseph that they actually were going to kill him. They decide not to kill him, but they throw him into slavery, sell him into slavery, I guess I should say. So here Joseph, he's probably about 17, actually I think it does say he's 17, is thrown into slavery. Now we do not know the age of Joseph when he ends up in Egypt. I think it was probably a couple years later. We do know he's still a young man, but I would say he's probably in his early 20s, somewhere around there, I would guess. And he's put in Potiphar's house. Of course, Potiphar is one of the leaders of Egypt. He's a kind of high official. So this meant he probably had a big household, and there were servants, and just managing the home itself. And Joseph is so impressive that Potiphar eventually puts Joseph in charge. So here Joseph has gone from the low of slavery. Well, he starts off high, being the favorite son, goes down to slavery. Now he's he's doing pretty good. Except for Potiphar's, elevated second himself. But Potiphar has a wife, and the wife kind of takes a liking to Joseph. And she kind of goes after Joseph, but Joseph, being a good, godly man, says, no, I can't do that. My master's put me in charge of everything, and I can't do that to him, and I can't sin against God. I can't do it. So what happens one day, she has an opportunity, and she comes on to him again, and this time he literally runs, but as he's running, one of his tunics falls off, and so she uses that to falsely accuse him of rape. Of course, Potiphar finds out, and he is sent where? To prison. So he's back going down on the downward slide. But while he is in prison, he actually is such a model prisoner that the main guard puts Joseph pretty much in charge of everything in the prison. So even in prison, he's kind of got an elevated status as chief prisoner. And then Pharaoh has a cupbearer and baker that both are sent to prison. Just so happens they're sent to the same prison Joseph's at. And while they're there, they have these dreams, and Joseph interprets the dreams for them. Of course, the cupbearer, his dream's a good dream. The baker, not so good. Baker will end up dying. But the cupbearer is released, and he told Joseph, hey, I'm going to remember you. I'm getting released. I'm going to remember you. Well, it didn't happen right away. Years later, Pharaoh has a dream, and the cupbearer goes, hey, wait a minute. Nobody can, interpret this dream, but I know somebody that can. And so they go get Joseph. Joseph has the chance to interpret Pharaoh's dream. Of course, the dream is that they're going to have several years of plenty and then 7 years of famine. And Joseph, well, he sees an opportunity. Of course, godly wisdom. He says to Pharaoh, you know what? This is what the dream is. And here's what I suggest. That you really save a lot of food during the good years, so that when the famine hits, you'll be in good shape. not only for this nation, but you'll get money from other nations or other people coming because you will be the only ones that'll have food. And Pharaoh's impressed with this plan, and he goes, you know what? I'm putting you in charge of all this. So here again, Joseph is elevated to pretty much second in command of Egypt. The ups and downs of this man's life is just totally crazy. And so, of course, it's not really crazy when you understand what God's doing. And this is where we start to see why Joseph was, God allowed Joseph to be sold into slavery, why he had to have these ups and downs. All these pieces where God was using them to connect and put Joseph in the position he needed to be in, not only to really save Egypt, but more importantly, to save his brothers, which represents the nation of Israel. The 12 sons of Jacob would become the 12 tribes of Israel. And so really, this is saving the nation of Israel. So first, a few of the brothers go down. Jacob says, hey, I heard they have some food in Egypt. Why don't you go down and see if you can get some? And then through a series of events and tests, Joseph is, I think he's curious. I don't think he's testing his brothers as though if they don't pass the test, he's going to, do something to them. I think he's just more curious. He wants to know all this time and everything that's taken place. Has his brothers changed? And so he puts them through things where he puts the money back, and at one point he puts a cup in a bag of Benjamin, the youngest brother, and the whole idea is to see how the brothers would react. Of course, the brothers have learned, and was it Reuben? I can't remember which one. Actually goes and defends Benjamin and takes the blame for the cup so that Benjamin would not pay a penalty. And Joseph sees that his brothers have changed. And so eventually Joseph gets to the point where he can't help but reveal his true identity. Now, of course, the brothers had no idea who it was. And you think about it. I mean, this is years later. Joseph's probably now in his 30s, maybe even his 40s. Certainly when the brothers sold him out into slavery, they probably didn't think Joseph would last long. He's probably been long dead. So, they just didn't expect it to be Joseph. He's probably in Egyptian clothes now. And so they didn't know who he was. Of course, Joseph recognized them. But they did not know who Joseph was, which here's a bonus material because it just hit me just talking about this. This is a picture I didn't see. Christ comes, who was not recognized? He was not recognized as being the Messiah, was he? The brothers don't recognize Joseph for being Joseph. So there's a little hint of what Christ would go through or have happened to him right there. So his brothers don't know who he is. Joseph reveals to them that he's their brother Joseph. Of course, the brothers now probably are in a panic, thinking, oh boy, we're done, we're toast. He's in this power position. I wonder if at some point they remembered the dreams where they would bow down, because that's what they would have done, bow down to him as a high official in Egypt. But instead, Joseph says, you know what? Don't fear. I'm not going to do anything to you. I'm not, Joseph didn't even confront him. He says, no, it's all good. It's all good. One of my favorite verses, Genesis, well, we'll read it in a minute. But instead, not only does Joseph not even confront him and not get retribution, he says, listen, go get the whole family, go get dad and everybody and come on down here and you are going to live and I'm going to provide for you all here. And that's exactly what happened. So as we see the story, just the idea of what Christ was going to do, the images of Christ are all over the place. So when you think about it, the first one comes from Genesis 37, verses 18 through 20. Now, when they, the brothers, saw him afar, even before he came near them, they conspired against him to kill him. Then they said to one another, look, this dreamer is coming. Come, therefore, let us now kill him and cast him into some pit, and we shall say, some wild beast has devoured him. We shall see what will become of his dreams. What the brothers really are saying here is, we can't take this guy, and there's no way we ever want to be in a position where his dreams come true. So the best way to deal with it is just get rid of him. And they want to kill him. And of course, one of the brothers speaks up and says, no, let's not kill him. And then some slave traders come by and they decide, hey, we can actually make a little bit of money and sell him to slavery. But here's where that the jealousy, that hatred, not wanting Joseph to be in a position that they had to take action. And we see this with Jesus. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered a council and said, what shall we do? For this man works many signs. If we let him alone like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our place and nation. The religious leaders at this point, this is John 11, this is getting close to the end. The religious leaders, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, all these people that had this power and this prestige, they were getting jealous of Christ because he's having all these followers. He's preaching a different message. And they're like, wait a minute. If we don't get rid of this guy, we can lose it. We don't want him to be in a position where anything he says can come true. The parallel there is just totally amazing. Joseph and the brothers of Joseph is like the Pharisees, the religious leaders. They don't like Joseph. The Pharisees, the religious leaders, did not like Christ. The hatred and the jealousy and wanting to make sure that the things that were being said would not happen. And the way to do it was to kill him. And so there's one picture of how Joseph and Christ kind of mirror each other. And then we have a second picture. In Genesis 39, 1 through 5, we read, his master saw that the Lord was with him. This is Potiphar being the master. The Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all he did to succeed in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended to him. And he made him overseer of his house and put him in charge of all that he had. From the time that he made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in the house and the field. In other words, because of Joseph, Potiphar had good fortune. God could not help but bless Potiphar because he was blessing Joseph, and a blessing trickled down. And this is another picture that we will see of Christ. And Jesus cried out and said, whoever believes in me believes not in me, but in him who sent me. And whoever sees me sees him who sent me. I have come into the world as light, so that whoever believes in me may not remain in the darkness. Think about it. In the same way, when we are in Christ, we are blessed because of Christ. And the blessings roll downhill, so to speak. So God blesses Christ, sent him to be the light of the world, to get us out of darkness, and we benefit from what Christ did. So just as Potiphar benefited from the fact that Joseph was in his house, we benefit because Christ is in our house. The blessings roll downhill. And this is another picture of Joseph and Christ being very, very similar. And then we'll see a third picture. This one, a few verses later, 11 through 15. But one day, when he went into the house to do his work, this is Joseph, and none of the men of the house was there in the house, she, Potiphar's wife, caught him by the garment, saying, lie with me. But he left his garment in her hand and fled and got out of the house. And as soon as she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and had fled out of the house, she called to the men of her household and said to them, see, he has brought among us a Hebrew to laugh at us. He came into me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And as soon as he heard that, I lifted up my voice and cried out. He left his garment beside me and fled and got out of the house. Uh-oh, poor Joseph. He is wrongly accused. He did nothing wrong. He was very persistent, in fact, in not sinning. Did nothing wrong, but despite being pure, he's falsely accused and sent to prison. Can you guess the picture of Christ here, or see the picture of Christ? Matthew 26. Now the chief priests and the elders and all the council sought false testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but found none. Even though many false witnesses came forward, they found none. But at least 2 false witnesses came forward. The same thing. Christ did nothing wrong. He was pure as pure can be. And yet he's falsely accused. And he would be sent to the cross because of those false accusations. Joseph, again, is kind of giving us a preview of what Jesus would go through. And that one is a pretty incredible one as well. Well, we have another one. Joseph is the favored son in a prime position. So here, this picture is going to be a little different in that it's really the mirror images of their life, the rise and fall, so to speak. So Joseph starts out in a high position. He's in a great position, being a favored son of his father. And wasn't that Jesus? He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions, or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. So, in a much more powerful and significant way, of course, and all these are, of course, when I say Joseph and Jesus mirror each other, in no way does Joseph, at the same, anywhere near the same elevation as Christ. It's just their lives have a similar experience. And we see here, so Joseph, favored, he in some ways exalted. He has a royal robe, a robe of many colors. He's in a great position. Christ is in the best position of all. But what needs to happen for God's plan to work? Both have to fall. Joseph falls. He rises and falls several times. But he has to go into the pits of slavery. He has to go to prison in order for God to take care of what he needs to take care of. And the same was with Jesus. Isaiah 53:7. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth, like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, and like a sheep that is before the shearers, and silent. And so he opened not his mouth. I could have picked out a lot of different verses here. The idea is that Christ actually being born, I mean, that in itself is taking more of a lowly position, a lot more lowly position. But think about what Christ actually had to go through as well. He did go to the pits, up to death, or in death. So Joseph falls, Jesus falls. Has to go through this, not falls as in sin, but has to go through this terrible time. But Joseph rises to power. God's plan works. And it works for Jesus too. Therefore, God has highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name that is above every name, so that at the name of Jesus, every knee shall bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. So you can see the parallel. In order for Joseph to get to the position where his brothers actually would come and bow down before him, but more importantly, for him to be in the position to save Israel, he has to go through the pit. He has to go down into the dungeon, the prison, slavery. Christ, in order to get to the point where God could exalt him, had to come to earth and go through the painful death that he went through. And because of that, now he is exalted. And he saved all who will believe. So even a kind of an image inside of an image. Joseph rises to power in order to save Israel. Jesus is resurrected in order to save humanity, for all who would put their faith in him. But maybe the most beautiful picture that I like comes here. And now, this is Joseph speaking to his brothers. Now, do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land for these 2 years, and there are yet 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, the nation of Israel, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh and the Lord of all his house and the ruler over all the land of Egypt. Hurry and go to my father and say to him, thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord of all of Egypt. Come down to me, do not tarry. You shall dwell in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near me, and all your children and your children's children, and your flocks and your herds, and all you have. There I will provide for you, for there are yet 5 years of famine to come, so that you and your household and all that you have do not come to poverty. And that's out of Genesis 45, 5 through 11. And this is the picture of Christ here too. Joseph could have got revenge. I still find it amazing he didn't even confront him. That's why I do think the test was not a test to see whether they were worthy of being saved. I think it was just a test to see. I think he was just curious. I wonder if my brothers have learned anything. And I think he's pleased that they did, but I think he still would have done everything he did, even if they didn't. And that's because it's grace. Isn't that what grace is? It's getting what we don't deserve, or being kept from getting what we do deserve. And it's not just grace and letting them off the hook. It is going so far to say, not only am I not going to confront you, not only am I not going to get my revenge, but I'm going to do the opposite of what you would think. I'm going to protect you and provide for you. I want everybody. Get your herds. Bring your cats and dogs. Bring whatever. Come down here. I've got you covered. I will make sure you survive. Now, if you're not seeing Christ here yet, I guess maybe I'm not getting through. It should be very evident. And this is out of Ephesians 2, 5 through 7. Even when we were dead in our trespasses, think about it. Just like Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery, we sold Jesus out with our sin. But just when we were dead in our trespasses, dead in our sin, made us alive together with Christ. By grace you have been saved. The brothers are saved because Joseph has grace. Joseph saw what God was doing, and he trusted what God was doing, and the same with Christ. And raised us up with him and seated us with him in the heavenly places in Christ Jesus, so that in the coming ages he might show the immeasurable riches of his grace and kindness towards us in Christ Jesus. Not only did Christ save us, but he's going to provide everything that we needed. He provided, and Paul tells us later that we were given all the rich blessings, all the spiritual blessings that there can ever be. We've already been given them. It's amazing. Just as Joseph said, bring everything, I've got you covered. Jesus said, I've given you grace and I'm providing everything you need. You just trust me and you got it. How amazing is that? And that's where it's at. That is just the incredible picture. Joseph, he accepted what happened because he knew it was God at work. And one of my favorite verses, Genesis 50:20. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. Is that not the same with Christ? He could easily look at us and say, you meant harm to me, and well, don't get anything from me. Don't expect anything. But even on the cross, what did Jesus say while he was on the cross to the people that were inflicting pain? Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. Isn't that the same thing? Because Jesus knew he had to go to that cross. He wasn't blaming the people who put him on the cross because he was trusting God even more. And that's what Paul tells us. I'm sorry. Let me get this verse in first. So Jesus trusted his Father's plan, just as Joseph did. Again, for the second time, he went away. This is him praying in the garden. He went away and prayed, my Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, your will be done. Joseph, I think, understood that he had to go through everything he did, didn't hold any grudge, because he saw the greater good that God was doing. And the same with Christ. He didn't want to go to the cross, but he knew that was the Father's plan. And if it was his plan, he was going to trust him and do it. And this is likewise where we need to trust. And this is why these pictures can help us, because we see a human story with Joseph and his brothers. We see real people trusting God and what it meant. And we can look at that, and then we can see it's the same with Christ. And so we can trust Christ. And that's what Paul tells us in Romans 8:28. The mirror is really a mirror image or mirror picture or mirror verse of Genesis 50:20. These two verses are basically the Old Testament version and the New Testament version. And Romans 8:28 says, and we know that for those who love God, and it's really trusting God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. In other words, this verse is, I've said this before, this verse is used out of context, and it's the one thing you got to understand is it's about God and his plan, not our plan. So we see things work out good when we understand it's God's plan. Do you think Joseph, when he went to slavery, when he went to prison, do you think he thought this was good? He didn't think it was good on his account, but he knew it was good on God's account. And that's what he did. That's what faith is. It's understanding. It's not about me and my plan. It's about God and his plan. And if that means I have to go through some rough times, well, I'm going to trust God. Because I know if I'm trusting him and I'm looking to his plan, then I know all things will work out just the way they're supposed to work out. Even if that means it doesn't humanly seem like it's working out for me. See, it's not about me. And that's where people get this verse wrong. They make it about them, and they think anything or whatever they do, it's going to work out for good. Well, it's going to work out for good according to those who are trusting and loving God, who understand it's about his purpose. That's why it says there, according to God's purpose, not our purpose. So today, really, the thing to take away from this story is the fact that it's sometimes a lot easier when we can see that real people like Joseph. We go, Joseph, I can relate to him. Maybe you've had those ups and downs. And maybe just now it's hitting you. Hey, man, looking back now, those ups and downs that I went through, I see what God did with it. That's pretty amazing. Or maybe you're in a down right now and you need to just be reminded and look at Joseph's life to go, okay, I'm down now, but if I just keep trusting God, if I remember Romans 8:28, Genesis 50:20, if I remember it's about God and his plan, and if that's what I want, and if you love God, that's what you should want. Correct? We love our spouse, we love others around us, we want good for them, don't we? We want their plan to succeed. If I love God, I'm going to want his plan. I'm going to want to trust his plan. And so if you're in that down time, maybe downward slope in the prison, so to speak, maybe just a reminder, hey, okay, I'm focused on myself, but I can't. That's what I say often. We need to keep one eye on heaven where Christ is seated, Colossians 3, and one eye here because we have to live here. But the moment you put both eyes on earth and you lose track of Christ, it becomes about us. As long as you have that eye on Christ, it's about him. And then as we navigate this world, we're constantly having him focus, and we go, yeah, I know, I'm going through this time, but it's about him. I can trust him. So hopefully Joseph provides that wonderful, beautiful image of a man of faith who endured much and then poured out grace because he knew it was about God and his plan. And then we need to do likewise. When we have opportunities, we need to pour out grace because grace has been poured out to us. We need to have faith. Even when things don't look good, having that faith. Father, I do pray that this will be a wonderful picture, a reminder to us to continue in our faith, to continue to trust you no matter what's going on. And Father, certainly if we are like Joseph at the end of the story, just help us to remember to pour out grace when we have those opportunities, when when we have seen your hand at work and you've used our life in just amazing ways, we need to act just as Joseph, and more importantly, as Christ, in pouring out grace, just as we had it poured out to us. So, Father, I do pray for this, and I pray for this moment of communion, that again, it's a beautiful reminder of exactly what you have done for us. And as it says here very clearly, the focus is not about us, the focus is about you. Do this in remembrance of me. That's not me, Ed, it's you saying that. So, Father, let's remember what you did, and then praise you in your Son's name. Amen.